Hey everyone, so the FDA has really cracked down on the CBD industry, and as a result, there's an explosive growth opportunity for cannabinoids again. So what exactly has the FDA done? Find out now in our latest podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dales Report podcast, and happen to be joined here today, Chris Meiering. He is the VP of Commercial Operations for BayMedica. Chris, how's it going?
Excellent. Happy New Year.
Yeah, I know. Where are you based out of?
Durango, Colorado.
How's the weather been?
Yeah, it's pretty good. We've got a little snow last night, and then back to sunny and chilly like it is in the winter in Colorado.
One of the hottest real estate markets right now in the U.S., that's for sure. People just...
It's a little crazy.
You getting a lot of the California friends coming out to your state from what I hear and see?
Yeah, a lot of Californians and a lot of Texans, actually. Texans seem to love Southern Colorado.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to have you on for my viewers that are watching. The reason why we want to have you on is because of InMed Pharmaceuticals, which trades on the Nasdaq. They acquired your company late last year. But before we get into the acquisition and how it was made and why it was made, let's first find out what you do in the cannabinoid industry and why BayMedica is viewed as a desired company within the space.
Yeah, that's a good question. So speaking in terms of BayMedica as a company and why we're kind of unique in the space is that we are in essence a pharmaceutical company at heart.
Yep.
But have a commercial aspect to it. So a lot of pharmaceutical players only dabble in pharmaceuticals, or that's their sole goal. And then you got a bunch of the companies you think of regularly about cannabinoid extraction, product manufacturing, et cetera. We kind of bridge the gap between those two.
Okay.
Our core team is pharmaceutical to the core. They brought me on with my commercial packaged goods history and manufacturing history to kind of take the technologies we've been developing in the lab and bringing those to the consumer marketplace.
How is Big Pharma viewing the whole cannabinoid industry? What have you learned? Because the industry has really cleaned up over the last year or two, has it not?
It has cleaned up, and it's getting cleaner, and I think that's a great thing for the industry in general. And, the pharmaceutical industry outside of GW Pharma for the last 2 decades has kept it a little bit at arm's length just because of regulatory aspects within the marketplace.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more interest these days. A lot of companies are coming out with cannabinoid-based medicines and engaging in clinical trials. So I think we're really at the precipice of a kind of a great age in cannabinoid-based medicines, both on the pharmaceutical side of the business as well as the consumer side of the business.
It's good to see, and it was needed, was it not?
Definitely needed. It was a little scary a few years ago in terms of how a lot of these companies were coming to market.
You could get your go-to sushi at a gas station. You look on the shelf, and anything was labeled with CBD. It was like, was this really what you're getting, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's still to some extent that's happening, but I think we are definitely evolving into a much more mature marketplace, which is going to be great for everybody involved.
So how did this whole deal come to fruition, and why did it make sense to be acquired by InMed Pharmaceuticals?
So Shane, BayMedica Inc., prior to the acquisition, our CEO, and Eric Adams, CEO of InMed, they knew each other professionally for a while.
Okay.
And they had been, talking to each other. We were sharing what we were doing on a broad scale. And then we entered into an agreement on the pharmaceutical side of the BayMedica business to create some new chemical entities or cannabinoid-based medicines that could be patented. So we created a few of these for InMed, engaged in a partnership in that way. We supplied those compounds to InMed. That was announced about a year ago, I think. Yeah. And through that dialogue, we realized we had a good match in terms of teams, and we actually were pretty synergistic, and we filled each other's gaps in some ways. Yep. And that's kind of what led to the true M&A acquisition discussions.
I don't want to trouble you with too much investor language, but I wanted to ask you, if I was an investor in InMed Pharmaceuticals, what do I like about this acquisition in particular, and what would your response be?
I think we bring a unique set of opportunities to the investor. I mean, we've got the InMed side of the business, pharmaceutical driven, early clinical trials, cannabinoid-based medicines, And then we've got and they have a manufacturing technique called IntegraSyn, which is a cell-free manufacturing technique, which is fantastic. And then we have BayMedica, who we have a yeast-based manufacturing technique, and we have a chemical synthesis technique. And the big synergy was on those analogs. We were able to provide those analogs for the pharmaceutical side of the InMed business. And we had established ourselves as a manufacturer of rare cannabinoids. We launched cannabichromene CBC a few years ago. And I think one thing that's going to be really unique with it is unique after the acquisition, is that InMed's a pharmaceutical company, and we're going to be deriving revenues from commercial cannabinoid sales that BayMedica brought to the table.
Makes sense. So let's talk, I guess, currently about the cannabinoid landscape. When we look at the consumer cannabinoid sector as a whole, CBD obviously based products continue to dominate the market. With the market, though, maturing rapidly, how do you see overall the cannabinoid industry evolving, and what are the things both consumers and investors should look for here in 2022?
Yeah, the market's really changing. It's changed a lot in the last couple of years, and it's changing rapidly this year. And I think one thing to look out for this year and moving forward, a couple of big things: minor cannabinoids, but how minor cannabinoids are going to be used in the commercial space. And specifically, I like to say if everybody's got CBD from a brand perspective, nobody's got CBD, right?
Exactly.
The only thing you can do is add more. You can vertically integrate, et cetera. And people have done all that. What's, I think, going to really make a big difference over the next year and coming years and in the future is being able to bring pharmaceutical style ethos products into the commercial marketplace, and then allowing the brands and the manufacturers out there to offer something other than just CBD. So if you can offer a very specific ratio of product of CBD, CBD-V, and CBC, that's a unique offering, and that will stand out on the shelf. You've seen those shelves. Those shelves are they're crowded.
I know.
And if you're a brand, how do you distinguish yourself on the shelf at a health food store?
I'd be curious to know, like we've talked about this, about how the FDA has come down on a lot of these companies. I'd like to know exactly what were implemented for all these companies across the board, like what has changed. And like we are definitely seeing in the CBD market, basically a shakedown itself due to massive price compression and saturation. So if you could explain to us, the FDA obviously is starting to clean up this industry. What changes have they implemented for people to really understand what's happening?
The changes are, I think a lot of them are still forthcoming. I think what we've seen so far are a lot of letters around making claims about your product being a drug-like product. And those are where people have been getting into trouble with the recent letter they sent out that denied it being a new dietary ingredient in the U.S. It's kind of a big deal. But the horse is out of the barn, and it's going to take some time, but I believe that the market will resolve itself. Mm-hmm. We will get some regulatory frameworks that lay down the ground rules and let everyone, operate legally and freely in this marketplace. It's going to take some time. But the main issues are around claims, and that's been true since the DSHEA Act and nutraceuticals, that if you're not making a drug and going through the process of doing clinical trials and getting FDA approval, you can't be making claims on your packaging. And
which has been the big difference, right?
Big difference. And what's interesting and I think beneficial about BayMedica and InMed is, since we both come from a pharmaceutical background and that ethos of pharmaceuticals, we understand that's the pinnacle of research in order to make a claim is a drug. And that's kind of baked into our DNA. So we're glad that the FDA is going to be sorting this out. Hopefully Congress will help out a little bit. And we're already positioned and will be well positioned in the future to operate with whatever framework they put forward.
What's your thoughts on Congress? And you don't have to answer that. I know it's the industry and the future and the growth opportunity across the board is so promising, but that obviously appears to be the major stumbling block right now is just getting things done with Congress, which I'm sure you can probably understand and relate to right now.
Yeah, and I think Upton Sinclair said you don't want to see how the sausage is made, and
Yeah.
Congress is that way. We're getting to see when you're attuned to a part of what you see Congress needed to do, and you see how the sausage is made. It's not something you like to see.
Yeah, I know.
A great example is the Farm Bill. They put in that Delta 9 THC exemption, or the hemp in hemp. They put Delta 9 THC is the only thing that you can't make. And you saw immediately people try to go create a lot of loopholes around that with Delta 8.
I know.
And now you're seeing states step in and implement their own regulations around Delta 8. So it'll be great when it does finally happen that we have a broader framework that everybody can operate in.
Well, we touched a little bit before on like product strategy with CBD and CBD-V and just the differences between THC and THC-V being non-intoxicated. You don't have, quote unquote, the munchies. What overall does the demand look like for these products right now, what you're experiencing?
We are seeing really strong demand for THC-V in particular.
Mm-hmm.
The customers we work with, and we sell to a lot of distributors and white label manufacturers, they're at the point where they can buy as much as the market can make currently.
Okay.
So it's a market that's ripe with opportunity.
One of the things that Eric Adams, who's the CEO of InMed, has mentioned to me in the past is being able to scale from benchtop to commercial scale production, which is a massive challenge in this industry. So does BayMedica solve a lot of those problems? If so, how?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, like we talked about why the merger made so much sense is because we do help solve that problem because of our history with CBC manufacturing. We took a process where our lead chemist at BayMedica was making a few milligrams on the bench, maybe up to a gram of it on the bench. And we took that process to a suite of contract manufacturers and helped co-develop a really robust process that is ultimately scalable to whatever size is necessary and the market demands. And by having that network of relationships, and network of suppliers and manufacturing built, now we come back and we bring in CBD-V, we bring in CBT, we bring in THC-V, we bring in what's next. So it's been really great to be early to market as a large scale manufacturer of some of these minor rare cannabinoids.
How do you figure out a robust portfolio? Easier said than done, I would think, but where do you start and begin?
With respect to individual cannabinoids? Yeah. So one thing is there's a market, the pull, and then there's the push type of marketing, and the pull is definitely happening for THC-V. That's a great example of pull happening. When we made the CBC market, we kind of forged it ourselves. We manufactured at a competitive price point, then went out and created that market to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
The other really big piece of it is the plant is very efficient at some cannabinoids. One of the reasons why we didn't go into CBD from the commercial perspective, we knew the plant could make a lot of it. It's really easy to purify out of the plant. Now you take something like THC and THC-V, that's much more of a challenge to purify those two apart from each other.
How so? How so?
Because we talked about that core structure is so similar.
Yeah.
It makes the kind of the techniques you would use scientifically to separate them much more challenging.
So when I look at this industry, you have a big pharma background and a lot of the team with experience in that field. Are there a lot of executives and people from the big pharma industry pivoting into this industry right now? Or do you what I'm trying to build out here is like the team that you have, the market potential, and obviously the advantage based on the experience. What does the current landscape look like that for now? And do you start to see more and more people from the pharma industry pivot into this industry?
I think if you could be at the executive board tables of a lot of the big pharma companies, they have been talking about this for quite some time.
Okay.
And I think we're starting to see, especially with the GW Pharma sale and acquisition by Jazz, we're now starting to see a little more public evidence of that. But if I were a waging man, I'd bet that those conversations have been had, are being had, and will be had in the future. And one of the keys for big pharma to join this is that a naturally occurring compound like CBD, you can't protect it. The plant makes it; it's a natural molecule. So these natural or these analogs to the natural compounds that we talked about at the beginning,
Yep.
those are going to be really key for, I think, wider adoption within the what we call big pharma sector of the business.
It's exciting, is it not?
It's really exciting. I think the early players like ourselves. There's some great opportunities out there. Looking long term, there's some fantastic opportunities.
Last thing I wanted to bring up too, and one thing I noticed is about this acquisition is rather than have an in-house production capabilities, you utilize actually third-party manufacturers. Why is that, and what's the advantage of that approach?
Good question. We kind of touched on it obliquely, but running a factory is very expensive. CapEx considerations are massive. You've seen some of this in some of the extractors. CapEx is incredibly expensive. The time frame to build out is expensive, time consuming, and the personnel have to be very specialized, and the equipment's very specialized. And the only way you make money if you're a factory is if you're running all the time.
Yeah.
And we figured as ourselves, we'll generate the science. And then we'll leave it to the experts of manufacturing at scale to do what they do best.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to pivot, you didn't just buy a bunch of equipment that might be on an auction block, which you're seeing a lot these days of extraction equipment. It's all over the place on the open market.
You can't keep
a lot of places built out huge capabilities, and now they're shuttering.
You can't keep up with technology. Something today is dated 12 months down the road, right?
Exactly.
Well, this has been good. I want to get a better idea for my viewers, just an understanding of what this acquisition meant and what the obviously advantage and opportunity is for InMed and extending their portfolio. But I really like the idea of where this industry's headed, obviously in 2022, and how Big Pharma continues to have more conversations and the requirements that are obviously expected for this to be a legitimate industry, which you can definitely tell. And I think a lot of people are being re-educated on the industry as a whole from, say, 3 or 4 years ago as to where this could potentially be. Do you not think?
Agree 100%. You think about 5 years ago, CBD, people had heard about it. And, and then the way the industry's evolved from it being a niche industry, a legal industry, to where we are today, it's leaps and bounds. And I think that was the future is more bright than what we've seen so far with respect to the opportunities within the industry. It's cleaning itself up. A lot of groups are shaking out. The winners are going to be poised for a lot of success.
So you think we'll see more acquisitions like a GW and Jazz Pharmaceuticals later on down the road in this industry?
I wouldn't count it out. That's for sure. I think, I'm assuming they're developing in-house as well, but I think acquisition targets are going to be ripe in the future.
Yeah, it's good. Chris, I appreciate your time. Let's keep in touch.
Chad, appreciate it as well.
All right,
Have a
take
good day.
care.